Hey garden friends, today we're going to talk about the 15 top gardening mistakes that new gardeners make, and this is from research, this is not just my opinion, and how you can avoid them. So many of you will know this already because I know a lot of my viewers are veteran gardeners, but this is what my little bit of research and comments that people have made or questions they've asked me, and that's where this is coming from. So let's get rolling. Alrighty, yes, new gardeners will make mistakes. We have all made mistakes in our gardening lives. I have been gardening for 40 plus years, and I've made some of these. And over the years, I have learned how not only to avoid them, but how to grow from them. So, number one is planting without knowing sun requirements. Now, I watched a fellow YouTuber. They had an area beside their house that they thought was shade, and they put in shade plants, and it was going to be their secret cottage shade plant area. And come to find out, after they've been there for a little while, that it does get quite a bit of sun, and it burnt their shade-loving plants. Now, that's where observing through the season where the sun hits and for how long really makes a big difference. I have a video, I will link it below, on sun requirements and how to do what I call sun mapping. And that'll help you get a feel for the areas around your home that you want to plant and what kind of plants will do best there, whether they're sun-loving, part shade, or full shade. And that's just something, so you don't lose plants. And when you lose plants, you lose money if you paid a good amount of money for them. And we don't have money to spare. At least I don't, by killing things that it could have been avoided. So always check how many hours of sun your space actually gets. And in my sun tracking, it tells you through the season, it changes how many hours that area, because of where the sun is in the sky, the trees around you, all of those factors do have a bearing on it. So that's why over a period of time, you need to know what's what. Because at one time of the year, it might be in the shade, but in high summer, it may be in the sun, and shade plants won't do well there. Okay, number two, overwatering. This is one of the number one beginner mistakes. More plants die from overwater than from too little. So roots need oxygen. Too much water robs them of the oxygen. So they need that oxygen as much as they need moisture. And that's why a lot of potting mixes and whatever have like perlite and other things in them. Perlite itself holds oxygen, so in a pot, in a container, it helps the medium that may become compressed over time not to. And those perlite helps to hold the oxygen even when it's saturated with water. And if you saw any of one of my winter sowing or my sowing in containers, my indoor sowing, I show that I put like maybe half an inch to an inch of perlite on the bottom layer. And then I put my potting medium on top, or seed starting. And then that always has oxygen down there. It's just that's one thing I have found successful. And that's why you always hear people saying well-draining soil. And that's because the water can displace the oxygen if you're not careful. 3, planting too close together. Tiny seedlings look tiny, but you need to give them the room to grow. And when you overcrowd, it leads to poor airflow, disease, and smaller plants. Plants won't grow as big as their potential. Now, I did have a video, it was not that long ago, about how I do plant closer when I'm planting out perennials for a lusher look. But I did also mention that I will remove a plant once they start growing too close together. So that is the way you can follow the principle. I never say rules. Principles are guidelines that you can adjust, whereas a rule is hard and fast. But as far as planting distance, this planting too close together can be detrimental. Or if you don't remove, like if you started a bunch of seeds in direct sowing, then if you don't remove some of them, they will be overcrowded. So 4, ignoring soil quality. So good soil is everything. Many gardeners, beginners, will skip soil improvement and wonder why their plants struggle. Now, I was watching another gardener, and they had just purchased some property, and they had wood chip mulch on one portion of the property that they were just starting on. And the other, they had run out, so they didn't put any. And then the next spring, they went to plant, and they planted the same plants in both soils, the one that had been mulched, the one that had not been mulched. Over the winter, the mulched ground had decomposed some of the mulch, and it had improved the soil. The other area, which had not been improved, was just the same. So when they planted the plants, they were amazed at how the mulched soil, those plants grew vigorously. The others in the unmulched soil did terrible, no matter how much they fed them, no matter what kind of stuff they put in the planting hole when they planted them. Nothing worked to get those plants to look as beautiful as the one in the mulched soil. And that's because that soil had been improved. So that's the importance. And it can make or break your success in the gardening and make you feel like you're a great gardener. I was watching a long time ago. You ever watch like the Victory Garden or whatever? This was back in the late 70s, early 80s. That's how long ago it was. It was on PBS. But I remember them interviewing a woman who was growing plants, like it was black-eyed Susans, in an area that they should not have thrived. And they said, how are you getting those to thrive? And she says, if you've got good soil, you can grow anything, just about anywhere. And that always stuck with me. So soil improvement is very, very important. Not reading plant tags or the seed packets. I just did a video on is the gardening industry trying to scam you? And one of the things mentioned by a person claiming they are was that the tags, the information on the tags and the seed packets was misleading so that you would have to buy garden products. And that's just not true. So those little tags hold important information about spacing, sun, height, and timing. They are not just decoration. They are not just trying to scam you either. They hold important clues for your success in growing those plants. So number 6, starting too early. Now I have been guilty of this, and I also experiment to what I can get away with. And if you start plants too early, like zinnias or tomatoes or things that like hot weather, they may sprout, but that early start is not the best start, because if you don't give them optimum conditions, those seedlings will not be as sturdy or as healthy as ones that you start at the right time for those plants. I learned that, or that was emphasized to me at the horticultural show I went to a couple of years back. And they said, and they did comparisons about how if you don't have a strong seedling, and that means giving them what they want, then that plant will struggle. It'll be more susceptible to pest problems. It'll be more susceptible to disease, like fungal problems. No matter, even if it starts out small and you think, oh, this is great, I'm getting an earlier start, and looks good when it's small, it doesn't mean it plays out that way through the season. Things like certain soil temperatures, etc., and if you try to force that, you're not going to end up with a good result, or I should say the best result. Now, sometimes you can get away with it and you think, wow, that worked, but it could have been an off season. I know I've had springs that were much warmer than normal. I've had springs that we had a warm spell and then a frost, it killed everything that I had started too early, or etc. So kind of like I had started some zinnias, winter sowed them. It was later, it was starting to warm up, winter sowed them, they came up, it was beautiful. I thought, great, I'm getting an earlier start, and we had one of our late freezes. it killed every one of those zinnias. So for me, it would have been better to either start them indoors and then put them out when they passed my last frost date instead of jumping the gun. I did not get an earlier start. So, over fertilizing. You know, some people think more fertilizer equals better growth, which too much, it causes weak plants, excess leaves, or even root burn. It also can create an imbalance in the sugars in a plant. And I just learned this on a podcast. I get nerdy with garden information and I deep dive into the science. But pests flying overhead from far away, they can look down at plants that are on the ground and they can see when a plant's sugar content is off balance. And they'll think, oh, wow, that's a plant to go for. That is something I can eat or suck the sap out of and be wonderful. But ones that are healthy and have the correct sugar content, they will look at those plants and they'll say, nope, I can't digest that one. And that's when it has the right fertilizer, the right food, whatever, that prevents that pest attack. You don't have to combat the pests because the plant is already repelling them. And I found that podcast so interesting. And it has all to do with what it's being fed. If it's being fed too much, you've got lush, tender growth. The bugs love it. So 8, choosing plants that don't fit your climate. Now this is not only perennials. Perennials, the zone tells you what will overwinter in your area, most likely overwinter. But what if it's something that gets fungus easily and you have a very moist climate? It doesn't matter if that perennial will survive the winter temperatures in your area. Will it survive your climate, which could be wet, constantly rainy? Because there's plants that they don't like that. So they aren't going to thrive even if they live through the winter. And that's the same with annuals. Annuals, they're meant to die off before winter, but they won't thrive in your climate unless you give them special care. And I'm thinking of like up at the Mendocino Botanical Gardens. That is a zone 9B, but they have to grow tomatoes, etc., in greenhouses because they can't get them to produce with their cold summers because they're on the coast, they get fog, colder temperatures. I mean, the highs might be in the mid 60s, but it's the damp and that causes problems. And, tomatoes, they like it warm. So they aren't going to produce well unless they get the conditions they like. And so they have to modify to get tomatoes. And there's a lot of heat-loving plants that, that's the same, or they like arid conditions. So that's things you have to think about. Okay, you don't want to waste money buying the wrong plants for your microclimate, etc. So number 9, not mulching. Mulch saves water, suppresses weeds, protects soil, and improves plant health. Skipping it makes gardening harder. Now that mulch goes along with what I said earlier about the soil condition. And I just had seen a video of someone saying don't mulch your vegetable garden because it will tie up nitrogen and your plants will perform poorer. That's not accurate because according to science, the mulch, if you just put it on top, which is what mulching is, this is not digging it in to the soil. You're laying it on top to protect, to hold moisture in, to prevent weed seeds from germinating. And it will have a little bit of nitrogen use at the top level where it is sitting. But where your roots of your plants are deeper, there's no nitrogen use by the mulch. So to say that it will restrict or inhibit your plants from, way down deep is totally unscientific and wrong. You just have to be careful. You, like I said, you want to lay it on top. Now, I have often in my vegetable garden mulched with alfalfa hay. Works beautiful. There's some people that'll say, oh, you are bringing in weed seeds and whatever. If you have your mulch thick enough, no weed seeds are going to germinate, whether they're alfalfa seeds and you wouldn't mind alfalfa seeds. They're a high nitrogen producer. I've done it also with oat straw. And yep, I had little oat things come up, but they are so easy to pull up that it was not an issue. So just mulch your garden. It will save you so much, and it improves the soil. Now, I do have a video that I shared, which was on ground covers that replace mulch. You can plant them once, and you don't have to mulch in that area anymore. And that's very effective. I have not tried that in my vegetable garden because you're pulling stuff out so much, and I'm reseeding in there so much. So if you want to plant like a bunch of lettuce to come up between plants, that works too as that living mulch. Okay, watering at the wrong time. Now, watering midday wastes moisture. Early morning is best for deep, healthy root growth. Now, that's if you're doing overhead or sprinkler gardening, or even with a hand watering wand. If you are doing drip irrigation, and I shared a video this summer of my drip irrigation setup. It's DIY, very fundamental, no big fancy thing. Then you don't have to worry about it because it's just dripping right there, and it doesn't matter if it's midday, morning, or night. And like here, we've had to, during drought time, have water conservation. And you are only allowed to water every other day, or we were allowed to water Tuesdays and Thursdays. But you were not restricted if you used drip irrigation. And that's because it doesn't waste water at all. So, 11, expecting instant results. Yeah, gardening, it teaches us patience. And many plants need a season or 3 to truly shine. So that's one thing. You'll see a lot of people, they'll cram a bunch of plants for instant gratification in a container rather than putting in a few plants and letting them fill in. You'll get a longer bloom time, a longer and better and healthier plants by just being patient. Gardening is not all about instant gratification. It is about learning, it's patience, and I have a video and a blog post all about slow gardening. Slow down and just enjoy it. You don't have to pack it full, which in the long run costs you more money, and it also will create issues that you don't want to have to deal with. And it could make you discouraged over gardening. You may think you're a bad gardener. So, buying too much at once. So, it's really easy to overbuy plants and overwhelm yourself. It's also easy to start too many seeds, and then you've got all these seedlings to get planted and you're not sure where they're going to go. Guilty. So, start small and grow your garden gradually. Yes, this gives you the opportunity to learn about your sun requirements. It gives you an opportunity to observe what works where, gives you the opportunity to build your soil. So a lot of times I will advise people who are starting out in new builds where their soil is absolutely junk, start in containers. You can control the soil because you're buying potting soil or making your own, which is what I do, and you have control. And you can set up a drip with your pots. But it also will tell you what you enjoy. And a lot of things, like even vegetables, will grow very well in containers. I have a video. I need to remake it this summer. It was an entire salad in a big half 50-gallon wood wine barrel. And I grew tomatoes. I grew radishes. I grew cucumbers. And what else did I have in there? Maybe like a cilantro or whatever. Anyways, it was very successful. And it was very easy, and it was in one container on my deck. And wonderful. So, yeah, don't dive in too deep and spend too much. And then things can, what do you say, get away from you, and they'll die in the containers, or you can't keep up with taking care of them. Then you'll think you're a bad gardener and be discouraged in that too. That's just not so. Just start small. Start small and grow from there. So ignoring plant size at maturity. So yeah, when you're buying that cute little shrub in a pot and it looks wonderful, and compact, you it could grow into a monster. And there are different plants that are beautiful when they're smaller, but then when they get bigger, they'll start throwing out suckers. They'll get these long canes that you didn't want. They're not the cute little plant you thought you were getting, and you may put it in an area that can't take the mature size. So number one, do your research. Research how big it gets and or how much pruning you're going to need to do to keep it in a smaller size. Now there's many beautiful large shrubs, but there's also cultivars where they stay more dwarf. So if you need to, search for the dwarf, and if there's a particular one you want, especially if you have a small amount of space. I would add to that is also ignoring the care, like how much pruning you're going to have to do. Is it going to be a high maintenance shrub? Is it going to be, you need to know all the ins and outs the best you can do. And there's tons of information online, and you can ask a reputable nursery or garden center that has very educated staff. Now, many times you're not going to find that at a big box store. You need to talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about. 14, not observing the garden. I kind of touched on this with taking your time. So, successful gardeners watch their gardens. Sun patterns, moisture, pests, and growth habits tell you what's working. You can also not only observe your garden, but if you have neighbors in your neighborhood who garden and they seem to be successful, or you can see they have a beautiful garden, you can chat with them, get to know them. We gardeners are infamous for wanting to talk gardening. And yeah, so I doubt they will not enjoy showing you and telling you what works in your area and what has been simple for them to grow. Number 15, thinking you're bad at gardening. Yeah, just because we all have fails. You may have a few fails before you get the hang of it. And as you grow as a gardener, you will know where you can fudge the lines, so to speak. Or I never use the term garden rules about things because rules are rigid. And many times you can work outside of the rules, or you can expand on them. So I use the term garden principles because garden principles can be adapted. They adapt to your region, your climate, your garden style, what you want to do, if you want a very simple hands-off garden or if you want to be more involved, all of those things. So yes, don't ever think you are a bad gardener. No one is a bad gardener. They just are inexperienced. And I would say, I'm going to add number 16 here. The number one, or one of the main mistakes many make, is not starting at all. They're too scared or they're too overwhelmed. And I will agree, there is a lot of misinformation on the internet and especially on YouTube. People trying to sell you their books on how to garden. They have complete misinformation. Was watching, it was a reel. It was a reel. And the gal was saying, the tall raised beds or those beds that are, I can never remember the name, Hugel, Twofer, whatever. I'll put the name across. And she was saying never put logs or big pieces of chunks of wood at the base to fill up these large, I have one that's 36 inches tall, a raised bed, because it will tie up the nitrogen when it's decomposing. Well, if she had done a little bit of her own research, she would have found out that those logs down at the base, deep under the soil, they do not decompose by bacterial activity, which is what ties up the nitrogen. Or it is enzymatic. It is enzymes that break those down, and it has nothing to do or any effect on the nitrogen content of your soil. Big chunks of wood like that down deep under the soil, what they act is sponges. They will hold moisture. So they will release the moisture once the soil above them starts drying out. And it helps keep that method of gardening low water. So you don't have to water as much because it has soaked it up, releases it as needed. It's almost like a self-watering system. And yeah, it does not hog the nitrogen. it doesn't hog the nitrogen as this person stated. So that told me she does not know or bother to learn the science behind any method that's out there in gardening. So always, when you're researching something, always try to get a site that's .org or like .edu. Those will have the scientific testing, the science behind any kind of thing in the gardening world that you want to learn. You don't want to go just by people's hearsay or their opinions, even mine. So I could be wrong in certain things, and I will learn along the way. And I enjoy comments from different people, even with a differing opinion, because we can discuss it. It's like we may not always agree, but when you discuss it, you learn something, or you can see something from someone else's perspective. And yeah, we're always learning, all of us. You never stop learning in the garden. And the best thing you can do is let your garden be your teacher. And that's because we all have different climates, conditions, and so you need to learn from your garden. So that is the top 15, really 16, mistakes that new gardeners make that you can avoid or work your way through. So sometimes it's just a matter of trial and error, and never think that you have a black thumb, brown thumb, whatever, when you try and sometimes you fail. I've been gardening 40 plus years. I have had fails, and then I learn out, okay, I do research. Why did that fail? Why didn't this work? And yeah, and there's all kinds of educational podcasts and things like that that you can get nerdy about growing if that's your jam. Some people, they just want to plop plants in and let them grow. So that's okay too. So that, my friends, is it. I will see you in my next video. I hope you enjoyed this, and please tell me your garden mistakes that you made and what you did to correct them. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.